part of taking care of yourself, which is what we talk about here on this podcast, is feeding yourself, which seems really simple and basic and obvious. But if you have absorbed the culture that we live in for any minute, you probably have a hard time feeling good about feeding yourself, or you have good foods or you have bad foods, or maybe you're always on a diet. And then you layer on top of that, that part of taking care of yourself is actually believing you're worthy of care, that you exactly as you are valuable and worthy. So that is why today Jolie and I are talking about the book Body Positive Power by Megan Jane Crabb. And yeah, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the discussion. I'm super interested to see where we end up going with it. I am Tara Swigert. I'm here with my friend Jolie Kelly of JolieCreates.com.
Hello.
And this is episode 32 of Take Care of Yourself. So this book is our read-along book, which we read a book together at the beginning of each month. And that doesn't necessarily mean we both finished it, but we both looked into reading it at the very least. I have lots of notes and tabs because I enjoyed it. Just to give you a quick overview, because I was like, what is the book even going to be about? Like, I had literally no idea what could you write a whole book about, because I'm used to the body positive movement on Instagram, where it's like, love yourself for who you are. Here's a picture of me in my bathing suit, even though I don't look like women in magazines. But so what she really covers is she shares her own story, and about midway through the book, she gets really deep with her own story of anorexia that landed her in the hospital and then in a psych ward, which I had not realized. So she was hospitalized for her anorexia. She's down to like 75 pounds. But she does an amazing job of not talking about weight and specific numbers through the book. There's like one time she mentions that she's down to 75 pounds. Which talks about kind of what body positivity is, which I think is important for us to talk about, the history of the ideal body, and also the history of dieting. She talks a lot about dieting because dieting is all intertwined with our ideas of what our bodies should look like. And she talks about her anorexia, and she talks about when she's talking about dieting culture, she also talks a lot about groups, like weight loss groups that get together, and how that's how people find community over their shared struggle. There's a chapter on all of the things we put off because we'll do it 10 pounds from now or 15 or 20, like the parts of our life we're not living because we're not thin enough. And she does talk about, she has a chapter about intuitive eating, which I have to talk with you about, Jolie, because we talked about it last week. And then she also talks about the health at every size. So the idea that like people say to her, being overweight is as unhealthy as being anorexic. And it's just not, for a lot of reasons. Like anorexia and bulimia is a mental health issue, and being overweight is sometimes not. Sometimes there's emotional eating. And she also talks about that, which I think is interesting. In the part where she talks about intuitive eating, she kind of hits on the things you and I talked about last week about that whole like trusting yourself and if you've killed your hunger cues. So there's lots we could talk about today, but I've talked for a while. So I want to hear what is kind of I think it's helpful if we start out with like where we are in the whole body acceptance like journey. So share yours, Jolie, if you don't mind.
So I'm just going to kind of give like an outline version of my history with body positivity and dieting. So I was put on or suggested to start a diet when I was 14. It was the summer before ninth grade, the summer before high school, obviously a time when my body was going through a lot of changes, and I was not even that overweight. Like looking back, I was just round-ish. Like I've always had curves and like a round belly, not a flat belly type stuff. But I remember going on a diet. We did Weight Watchers, and it was like super successful. Like I lost weight, and I got to like actually like for the first time a healthy BMI. And what is absolutely obnoxious is that number that I was when I was 14 after like my first diet is a number that I have kept in my head as the weight that I should be. And it is so harmful to like I don't even think I was finished growing. Like height wise I was, but like body development, no way. And I have since had 2 kids and 2 C-sections, which changes the shape of your body. Like that surgery, the abdominal surgery, will change the shape of your belly forever. But anyways, so I dieted at 14. I remember like stopping when I hit that number. I don't remember like going off diet and putting back on the weight, but obviously I did. I remember I got quite overweight like my senior year of high school, but then I like went off to college, lost weight over the summer, like put back on weight all through college. But like, so basically from the time I was 14 to the time I had my first kid at 23, I was on and off a diet for that whole time. Never liked my body, never felt like I was thin enough. Had my first kid, put on a ton of weight, which the comments that I would get when I was pregnant, he was a 10-pound baby. So at least, yeah, both my babies were 10 pounds. So at least,
and you're like this tall.
I'm 5'2". Yeah, 5'1" and a half, really. So yes, I put on a lot of weight, but a lot of it went to the belly, to the baby. And so obviously then once you have a baby, there's a whole bunch of pressure to lose that weight. But then I got pregnant again when he was 18 months, or maybe 16 months. I think my kids are like 26 months apart, so you can do the math. And got pregnant kind of with under 2 years. So I had lost some of the weight, but then immediately was pregnant again. When my second was born, we touched on this in some past episodes. He has a lot of food allergies that led to me having issues with food safety. It made me put a lot of foods into unsafe categories, which they literally are. Like peanuts are an unsafe food for us, but because he was reacting to everything, it felt like, but it made us feel like every food was potentially risky. And so there was a lot of just anxiety around food, a lot of panic attacks every time we fed him something new. That was kind of like the worst part of my anxiety. Like when my anxiety was the absolute worst, it was through that stages, and it led to me kind of hating my body because I blamed myself for his allergies, which is silly. And then I kind of, over the past, so my son is 6 now, my youngest, and I'd say over the past 3 years, we've got a really good handle on his allergies and on foods, and like food is no longer like a scary thing for us. I got into therapy and did a lot of therapy, and I got my anxiety really, really under control. And so now I feel like I'm finally at a place where I am accepting of my body. Like there's part of me that still struggles, not with the number on the scale, and this kind of goes back to the stuff we talked about in the While You Were Breathing episode, which is episode 30. The feeling of this body was not my body, right? Like I had 2 pregnancies really quick, and then you kind of wake up with a body and you're like, this is not my body. I don't know what this body is. And so it's just accepting like that this is my body now. Like this is the body who is amazing. Like it's been through 2 pregnancies and it's been through surgeries, and yes, it's going to have a floppy belly and tons of stretch marks, and like just kind of embracing that. And I feel like I'm finally at that point where like I feel really good about it, and I feel like I have a healthy relationship with food, apart from like still working on the hunger signals things and like some of the intuitive eating stuff. But that's kind of like where I am.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's something she talks about too, the whole idea of getting your body back after pregnancy. And she's like, it's like your body went on vacation and you're waiting for it to get back, and you're like in some like what did she say, like imposter body. And every mom friend I know who is like close enough that we've talked about it says that like this, either I feel like a feed sack and so like I'm just like the thing keeping this baby alive and not my own. It's like body autonomy, that it's like totally yours. When you have and you're breastfeeding an infant, you just don't have, you're just like not only yours anymore, you're somebody else's. And then the surgeries and all that, but like it is your body. It's your same body. It's been like amazing.
I hate that message so much if you have to get your body back, because I think it's such an external thing, right? Like there could be so many different messages about women's bodies after they've been through any kind of life change. but the message that we get is you have to get your body back. And like the number of people who felt like they could comment on my body, who felt that they could ask me when I was due, when I was not pregnant, including my doctor. Multiple times I would walk into my doctor and he'd be like, "Oh, when are you due again?" And I'm like, 6 months ago. I already had the baby.
My God, look at the chart before you ask me that.
Like the number of people who feel like it's okay to comment on your body and to like basically bring attention to the fact that my belly does not look like it did before 2 kids. It's really damaging. Like, I wish we had such a different message around motherhood and around like just new bodies or even bodies that age. Like I am also 30 now and I am not 17 or 20. Like my body at 30, I assume is supposed to look different, but we're not told any of those messages. Like I am told, like as a 30-year-old woman, I should still be as slim and as trim and as like compact as I was at like 17.
14. Right. I know. Well, and that's the damaging thing about 14 too, is like, that's just the beginning. Well, at least for me, it was just the beginning of like adolescence, in which a lot of things happen for many years. Like if you look at how long adolescence goes, like, and how long your hormones are crazy, it's years and years and years. Mm-hmm. So like you're not, and I even look at my teen brothers who started, adolescent-y things at 13, and like their bodies changed dramatically. Like they actually got the ability to gain muscle because they're sportsy people, so they work out with their sports teams. And I just think like seeing them made me realize, oh, my body changed massively from 13 to 20 as well. But there's like signals to them that it's the appropriate change. You're becoming more of a man. The signals to me were like, you're becoming more of a woman, and being a woman in a woman's body is really dangerous. Mm-hmm. So for me, the messages were, and it's because I was raised in a really conservative Christian environment, that girls and women's bodies are sinful. They cause sin in their brothers in Christ. That's, in the men and boys in their lives. And so your job as a woman is to not cause sin for men and boys. So that's like so complex, because how can you even control what somebody else thinks? But you're supposed to control what they think by what you wear and how you behave yourself. And you're not supposed to lean against them. And you're actually not supposed to lean forward, because like they might get a glance because they're trying to see your boobs, but that's your fault because you're the one that grew them. It's so twisted. And but for years I didn't realize how twisted that was. And really into my 30s, didn't realize how much that had affected trying to keep myself small. And we've talked before about just recording this podcast that we try to keep ourselves quiet when we're in public spaces. And part of, I know everyone's cultural message is that you're supposed to keep yourself small as a woman. Well, so when you add in that you're literally causing other people to go to hell, you're supposed to keep yourself like not just small in stature, but also kind of folded into yourself so that your boobs don't stick out and your butt doesn't draw attention. And like, that's not even like the clothes you wear, but also just how you're supposed to stand. And of course, nobody told me you're supposed to stand with your shoulders hunched forward. There just be a lot of messages about how you're supposed to not seduce people. So like, and it ends up, the world seems like a scarier, more dangerous, more sexualized place than in my adulthood. I realized it didn't need to be. Like my body didn't need to be sexualized every time I walked out of the house. And by sexualized, I mean that other people were looking at it with sexual intent, no matter how I dressed. So I, of course, dressed in hoodies and big jeans, and was told jeans were worse than skirts because jeans showed off the curve of your butt when I was 14. And I had no idea butts were a thing. I had no concept of it. So a lot of although I didn't ever diet, and I don't think I've ever been on a diet unless you count, like not eating sugar or not eating, meat. We don't eat any meat for years and years. And we don't usually eat cheese or dairy, but that's not about what it does to my body. It's about like ethics and morals of the animals.
I feel like that's a lifestyle choice more than a diet in terms of like it is supposed to reduce the size of your body.
And a lot of people though become vegan or vegetarian in order to lose weight. And like I did it just out of default because Jay was a vegetarian and we were broke. We always ate at home and he always cooked the meals. So, and then I read more about it and then it became more of a moral issue for me than and literally like it's never been about weight or food even being bad. It was just more like, I don't want to make that choice. So I haven't been on a diet, but have always felt like, so that whole thing about body shame and like not causing others to stumble compiled with like, do you deserve to eat that piece of cake? Have you been good enough to have that extra scoop of ice cream? And well, if you had that cake today, you should probably eat a salad tomorrow. All of those messages, which I feel like didn't come from any one place. Like nobody took me to Weight Watchers. They're just like in every women's magazine. And I used to love to read women's magazines as a kid. Like even the healthy magazines like Self. My grandma got me I think because she thought I had gained weight, she got me subscription to Self when I was in college. So what happened is I look back and I just always thought of myself as a chubby person because I had a friend who was like 5'3" and like 90 pounds when we were 14. And by the time we were 18, she was like 110 pounds. She was just extremely slender. I realized now it was just her body type, but she would say things that made me feel chubby. And she would say things like, do you need that piece of cake? And there Tara goes towards the cake. You better watch out for it. What? Because I was the chubby friend. And so, looking back, it's ridiculous, our ideas of what chubby was. And so all through college, I had really sportsy, beautiful, athletic friends, and I was not. And so I felt chubby then, even though I wasn't. I gained weight through college because I found Jay, and he just loved me and like unconditionally. And to see myself reflected in someone that loved me unconditionally, I started to be like, also, I started to separate from that idea that my body was like shameful. And I basically just divorced myself from my body. So like I'm a brain that walks around in this like flesh suit. The flesh suit doesn't matter. I became more of a feminist in college. So I stopped paying attention to my weight altogether. We didn't have a scale for years and years and years. And I also paid no attention to what my body needed. So no attention to nutrition, no attention to have I eaten today, no attention to have I moved at all? Do my muscles feel good? So the first time so that's like all my adulthood until I go to the doctor at 30 for a why aren't I getting pregnant visit. I had a panic attack, so she couldn't perform an exam, but she said, super helpful, so, if you lost weight, you'd have an easier time getting pregnant. And I was like, I have read those stats. And she was like, so I suggest going on a 1,200 calorie diet or less, and then come back when you've lost weight. Well, when you're 5'7", a 1,200 calorie diet is a starvation diet. Like that is levels of that they consider starvation under 1,200 calories. And so I was like, and I told my mom's an RN. She was like, that's ridiculous. That's too little. She was like, what you should do is just see how many calories you eat in a day and adjust it. And remember, I'd like paid no attention to my body or food or calories other than feeling guilty when I ate food that I liked and feeling like I didn't deserve it. So I got, it's called like My Calorie Pal or something. And it has all these foods already in it and you can put what you eat. And what I realized then is I was only eating like 700 to 900 calories a day. And so wait, what? Like, how could that be? Because I was chubby. And so I would always try to eat less and like tell myself not to eat when I was hungry and ignore my hunger signals. And so it was kind of that. And then reading up on realizing that I had all the symptoms of a low metabolism. I'd given it to myself by not eating enough, because what happens when you don't eat enough is your body thinks you're not safe, which is also part of the reason I might not have been getting pregnant, is because it thought we were under stress. And so it's super interesting. All these different things happen in your body to try to keep you alive. And so what I started doing is actually using a calorie tracker to eat more calories every day and to eat more protein and to eat more meals. And that started a year where I actually lost weight because I ate enough food. I like made my metabolism healthy again. I stopped being cold and falling asleep. I would literally and I didn't even think it was a problem, I would just fall asleep wherever. I fell asleep in movies. I fell asleep while Jay is talking to me at 2 p.m. Like I would just fall asleep. that's low metabolism because your body's trying to keep you alive and like conserve calories. So I ate more. I started running, and I trained for a 5K and then a 10K, and then I started doing this body weight workout. And actually, I say all that to say I paid attention to how my body felt, and my body started to feel strong. And that's when I started to feel like I started to wear skirts that went to my knee and not 2 inches below my knee, which was the previous rule. I started to wear like shorts again, which I hadn't done since a kid. And I realized like that's when I started to come in contact with all these messages that had been, even though I became a feminist in college and decided like the patriarchy can't tell me what to be like, it was also telling me that like my body wasn't good enough for me to even pay attention to. And so once I started paying attention to it, it helped bring up a lot of that stuff to work through. And what's crazy though is in the years since, like going through anxiety and depression, being put on anti-anxiety medicine that made me gain so I lost weight over the course of a year, and in the course of 6 weeks on one anti-anxiety medicine, I gained it all back. That made me feel horrible. And what's so weird is, so I know what was giving me the low metabolism to begin with, and I started doing it again. And it's only been recently that I look back and I was like, why did I stop eating food? But it's because in my head, there's still, even though I know all the science, there's a voice that says, if you're chubby, you shouldn't eat. That's crazy. Everybody has to eat. But like, that's so and then plus the medicine, it messed with my hunger, and it made me not want to get up off the couch. And so all of those things combined to kind of put me back in that mind state of like, well, you just shouldn't eat, and you shouldn't look at your body or pay attention to your body or do anything good. So that's kind of, that's the journey. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. There's so much in there, but I can definitely like just sympathize. It's funny, and I use that word, loosely,
right?
Ironically. So you are tall, and I'm short.
Right.
And the thing is, like, the messages that we got, like, the same messages, like, just damaged us both, right? Because I felt, as a short person, I should be tiny. All of the girls around me who the boys liked were short and tiny, and they were like cute, and like the boys would like pick them up, and like, and, like it felt like I was all wrong. But then like the other people I looked up to or like admired were really tall women. I had a lot of really tall friends who were curvy, but like on them, like it was okay, like I just felt
right.
Like I was just either too short for my weight or like too heavy for my height. Like I was just all messed up.
Right. Yeah. And I got the message of like, you're not supposed to be tall and powerful. Like you're supposed to be dainty and adorable. And so from the time I was 14, I was taller than my friends and therefore felt just ungainly, like just like too big, and I look back at pictures I have this picture of my high school. So all my friends were in orchestra with me, which was great because like, I feel like I had kept as healthy as possible body image throughout all the messages I was getting, because like my group of friends, there's a lot of diversity in bodies, and also like everybody dated and made out with boys. Like it wasn't like only this. Also, I went to a giant high school, so like there was enough people for everybody, kind of. But in our pictures, I'm like always tall and like hunched forward, and I'm not the tall skinny girl by any stretch. And also, I had no boobs, so like the really beautiful girls had like beautiful figures, and I didn't. And like, but the one thing I wanted to say is that I realized a couple years ago that like, so body dysmorphia is the idea that you don't really see your real body when you look at it. You like see something, and this is tied into a lot of eating disorders, is only through being married to Jay and having him like actually tell me the truth that I realized I had massive, and I still struggle with it. I will see people of a totally different size and think we're the same size. And there's no better size to be. It's just that I can't see who I really am. So even at my thinnest in high school and college, I thought that everybody thought I was really fat and disgusting. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So like a tiny roll on my belly would be like, or my thighs would just be like huge. And just like, I couldn't understand how people even could stand to look at me because I was disgusting. Like, I've had that, kind of inside my head since I was 12 or 13. And that's just, and it's all because it's like, and she says in her book, like, it's not our fault. It's we've been told these messages so much, like all of society, every magazine, every TV show, even the adults in our lives or the men in our lives, like, reinforce that. And the women in our lives, by doing the, like, oh no, my thighs are the fattest thing, like, reinforce that that's something you should be judged on, is how you look.
I don't think very many of us can look in the mirror and, like, accurately see ourselves for, like, the amazing people that we are. We just inflate, like, all of our flaws.
Exactly. And so, like, it drives me crazy. Like, all of us, we talked, before yesterday about this, and, like, every story and every woman whose story I've ever heard, it makes me want to hug that little girl, because a 13 or a 14-year-old is a little girl. I mean, you think about your boys, like, you're still such a baby at that age, but also it just makes me want to burn it all to the ground.
Yeah. I think I've done a few Instagram stories about this, and sometimes it makes me absolutely furious that I have hated my body for longer than I loved it. Because you think, 14, I'm 32 now, that was 18 years ago. So for 18 years, I have felt like my body was crap, was, too big, too whatever. And I only got to like it for 14 years. Like, what was wrong? Like, why? And then I think about, sometimes I look in the mirror and I think, like, every bad thing that I think about my body is someone else has told me. Like, we only think our bodies are fat because we've been given a standard for thin, right? Like, every single message that we have about our bodies, it's come from the media and it's come from everything else. I'm like, I only hate my body because I've been, like, systematically told over and over and over that curves and that, like, belly rolls and thighs with cellulite are ugly. I wasn't born with that knowledge. It was handed to me, and it makes me furious.
Yeah, it's so systematically everywhere. And that's the thing I wanted to be sure to hit on that she talks about too, is that it's not that it's like one person, right? There's not, like, one jerky guy who gave you all of your issues for the rest of your life in high school. There's, like, it's systematically everywhere. It is like the water we swim in, so that we don't even notice. And because there's a couple things that she says in her book that I was like, oh my gosh, like, women don't actually believe this. So one of them is that let me see if I can find it exactly. So I'm going to just read this paragraph. When we go to the beach and bare our skin, we're not there to be visually appealing to others. She's talking about wearing a bikini. We're there to feel the sand, hear the waves, smell the salt, take in the view. We're there to make memories. The dimples on our thighs or whether another beachgoer disapproves of our size is irrelevant. It's not why we're there. Being aesthetically pleasing is not the purpose of our existence. And I was like, obviously, like, that, right? But I think that, and she talks in another chapter about how staying hungry keeps us being able to do anything, like dieting and always being hungry and always comparing your thighs to someone else's thighs keeps you from actually A, enjoying your life, B, doing the amazing things you could do. And if you really, really absorb the fact that we're not here to be aesthetically pleasing, then it lets you realize, like, I'm here to do something else that's bigger and greater and feels better than just trying to be aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, she talks about, I think it's right at the beginning, about foot binding and how, like, it was to make women in that culture aesthetically pleasing, but what it did was, like, it literally kept them at home because they weren't able to walk without severe amounts of pain. Like, some of these things, like, have literally kept us at home and unable to be, like, super powerful, amazing women, like, that would have completely overthrown the patriarchy, like, 200 years ago.
Right, exactly. If we weren't constantly adjusting our bra straps, right?
We had pockets earlier.
Exactly. Like, what could I have got done with pockets in every dress?
And it is, like, so that women couldn't, historically, it was like, so women couldn't carry money. They had to rely on a male compatriot to have all the things with them. Like, it's so bizarre, like, that our clothing does not get to be functional because we are just there to be aesthetically pleasing.
Exactly. And you have to buy a bag that is a status symbol.
Right.
So if you want to carry stuff, you have to invest in a bag, and the level of expensiveness of your bag is still incredibly like culturally important, you know? And like, that's a whole thing that I won't even get into, like expensive bags, because it's a thing, especially where I live, that like, it's like a way of saying like, I can afford this. I'm doing okay. And so my husband's mom will ask me like why I don't carry a better bag if we're doing okay. Well, because that's not where I want to spend my money. Like what I always want to tell her is because like I'd rather spend my money on chocolate and books.
Yeah.
So back off. Like it's not where I want to spend my money. But she talks a lot about like not like being able to wear that, and like I feel like that's like kind of tied into everything we've talked about, is the idea that you're not allowed to wear something because you look a certain way. Oh, I wanted to say this. One of the main points she makes is that body positivity, the idea isn't to, and she's like, some people misunderstand that we want to replace the ideal body that society has with a slightly curvier version. Like we want an ideal curvy body. But she's like, no, we're not trying to like set up a new ideal. We're trying to say that like every body is ideal. So disabled, differently abled, any color skin, any size, any piece can be any size, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea that a curvier body is better or is more ideal is really damaging to like, I have several friends who were like 5'2" and super, super slim, and they get comments on their body too.
Yes.
Like we would think, oh, but they're thin. Everybody must love it. And they get comments like, my friend Lindsay has told me that literally every day at lunch, somebody in her office will be like, do you even eat? Are you even eating enough? Or girl, put on some weight. Or you shouldn't work out so much. You're already plenty thin. Because she like does CrossFit and she loves CrossFit. And, you know, it's just like, and then another friend who really wanted to be a certain size, got to the certain size, and she's like, but now my boobs are too small. And she got a boob job. And it was because she was like, what she said is like, clothes don't fit me right. I'm uncomfortable in everything. Everything isn't made for me to be this flat chested. And I was like, but what do you mean uncomfortable? And she's like, well, it doesn't look right. And of course, I just said, I love you and I support you no matter what. But the reality is, like, what I wasn't able to say to her is like, it doesn't look right based on some ideal you have in your head that society has given you. Like, it's not your fault you think it doesn't look right, but it's your choice to not accept that anymore as the right standard, you know?
I have often felt the same though, because I carry a lot of weight in my stomach, shirts, like, they'll ride up, like, it just feels like nothing fits me right. Like, I'm like, if it fits over, like, if it fits in my shoulders, which are like, probably like a size, whatever, like small. And then I need like 3 sizes larger to fit over my stomach. Like it does at times feel like, well, if I just lost weight, then at least the clothes would fit me, but they don't ever. Like that's just another lie. And she talks about things like that in the book. It's just another lie, like that we tell ourselves, or that we are led to believe by diet companies and everything, that if you just get to a size like 12, then like, you know, you'll look better, you'll feel better, you'll be happier. It's like, no, like, clothing is a whole other issue. Like the standard that it is designed for is not at all based on like how bodies actually look. Right.
And the idea that like your clothes would fit better if you lost weight, so then that's a reason you should lose weight. It puts it back on you being the guilty party as opposed to the clothes manufacturer being the guilty party. Because like, it's not like you're the only person shaped like you. They could make clothes that didn't ride up. But that it like my moment of like, oh my gosh, this is insane, is soon after we were married, I went shopping for pants with Jay. And as you know, men's pants come in the actual, well, here, inches. I don't know what they're like in the UK. But so like he wears a 36, 32 or something. So 36 around the waist, 32 in the length. And he tells me that. And I was like, oh, I've never shopped for men's pants before. This is like an excited married lady thing to do. And I'm looking and I was like, well, so that means your waist is bigger around than you are tall. Does that make you feel bad? Because like, to me, that would be crushing. which I'm sure the measurements are true for me, but like it's just like right out there. And he was like, no, it's just the size pants I wear. And I was like, well, but like you just know the exact size. And he's like, yeah, it's the exact, like they're all the same, exactly like this, no matter what cut or what fit. Like I might like how they hang differently, but they're all going to fit me the same. And then we went that same trip into an American Eagle, and I got the size that I was at the time, which was a 14, and I got it in 3 different cuts. And 2 of them, one I needed a size smaller, and one I needed a size bigger. So I try on all the pants. I end up walking out with 2 pair of pants, not paying a lot of attention. I get home, and I have a size 12, and I have a size 16. And I was like, well, I must have bought the wrong ones. Put them both on, they fit. I was like, what? I held them up to each other. The size 12 and the size 16 have the exact same waist circumference. And they had the same crotch length. So it was like at the same place to hit your waist. They were cut differently in the butt, but they had the exact same waist circumference. And I was like, do you see how crazy making this is? Because a lot of women, if they thought they were a size 14 and they had to buy a size 16, would like then spend the next month or year trying to lose the weight to get back to a size 14. And a lot of women who bought a size 12 would be like, oh my gosh, I've lost weight. Yeah. When neither is true, like, because they're the same size. Like, this house is not messing with our ability to operate in the world. We think the guilt belongs to us because I had to buy a 16 when it had literally nothing to do with me. Yeah. Right? Like, that was true that those 2 size pants were the same size, regardless of what size I am.
And even if it was true, like, why have we decided, like, we're okay at this size, but if we were that size, that was bad? Like, not only do we feel guilty about, like, the size we are, but then we have so much guilt about other sizes that are bigger or smaller than what we are. Like, it's insane.
It is. Like, it's so, my hope is that by us talking about it and us both sharing our own stories, that people will resonate with one part of it and realize, like, there's another way. Like, I think the first step, and she talks about this actually. I think the first step is realizing it's like a rigged system. Yeah. It's not you, and you're operating within this rigged system, and this is going to sound paranoid, but it's literally everywhere. And that you have a choice about whether if you decide to put your own self-worth in that rigged system or not. You can take it at any time. And that's like just the first step. So I was hoping that by us talking about like our realizations, and it will help people realize they can opt out of putting their value and worth in that. I mean, it's a long process, and I feel like you have to do a daily, like, no television ad about Slim Fast. I am like clicking past you. Yeah. It's just like constant, you know?
Yeah. And then for me, it's a lot of, she talks about this in the book, like looking at my body in the mirror, like actually looking at my body and not talking bad about it, but like just like looking at it and accepting it and loving it, and like recognizing that any thought that comes up is not true. Like, just because I think it does not make it true. Like, just having to like kind of release like all those thoughts, accept that you are healthy. Like, you can be healthy at the size you are. You do not need to lose weight or whatever to get healthy. Like, you're okay. And like, yeah, kind of going, I like that the book helps you break down a lot of the thoughts, because even on this journey, there are still times I think like, oh, but, and it's just not true, whatever the thought is.
Like, but I don't deserve to get that pumpkin scone because I should be thinner before I eat a 500 calorie scone.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like an example that pops up literally every day I go to Starbucks. It's like, well, you don't really deserve to get that.
I want to know, so what did you think about the intuitive eating chapter?
Oh, so I liked it. It actually like re-explained what is in the book Intuitive Eating that I liked about it. So, the whole idea that you would rate your hunger from like 1 to 10. And then what is interesting about what she says, and I don't feel like the Intuitive Eating book said this, you choose when you want to eat and how full you want to be. Yeah. Like, the intuitive eating was like, and stop when you get to a 6 or something, right? So 5 is neutral. 1 is like starved to death. 10 is like, I'm going to be sick. I ate too much. And Megan, I'm used to thinking of her as Body Posy Panda. So I was like, Megan is saying, like, decide where you want to be in the fullness scale. Any amount of fullness is okay. And that is like kind of radical, I think.
Yeah.
But so when I read that book, and I know listeners have written in and told me that really, really helped them heal their relationship with food because they were paying attention to their own signals. And so when I read it, I found that super helpful, as we talked about a little bit last week. And we might have glossed over this, so I just want to be clear for everybody listening. Like, what we were talking about is that we've ignored our hunger signals for so long, we never feel hungry until it's at a 1, and it's like, high alert, red alarms, like we're about to die.
Right.
And so that just waiting to feel it isn't necessarily going to work for everybody. Sometimes you have to like just schedule meals, not to limit what you eat, but to actually make yourself eat. That's why I want to share the bit about where I learned that I needed to eat more, because I feel like we don't hear stories about that. Like, nobody ever talks about, wait, constantly keeping myself from eating was making me less healthy.
Yeah, there's actually a woman who I followed on Instagram who has like this whole, again though, she kind of calls it a diet plan, which is just damaging, but it's basically like your body is supposed to be able to process 2,000 calories. And I was like, I don't think I've ever eaten 2,000 calories, because from the time I was 14, I was on like a 1,200 calorie diet. And like that kind of formed my basis for, this is what a good amount of food is. And sometimes I would eat over that, but then there was always guilt. Like, I knew I was eating too much. And so like that, my whole scale of like how much my body should eat, like I'm probably feel like when you told that story, I was like, I'm cold all the time.
Yeah. So you need to look into like feeding your metabolism, and I know you started scheduling so you eat more meals. That's good. So that'll help.
I have 2 issues with intuitive eating in general. One, I don't believe it's going to work for every person. My son is on the autism spectrum disorder, and it would not work for him. He, like, part of being on the autism spectrum is not having awareness of how your body feels. He won't tell us he has a headache until it's like pounding in his brain. Like, he won't tell us he's hungry until he's basically at a 1 where he's having a meltdown over something. And I'm like, hey kid, I think you need to eat. He needs to be on a schedule for food, because that's the only way he will like know to eat. I always like get just a little bit annoyed when like people try and apply something to everyone, because it's not going to work for everyone.
Right.
And I do believe that all of us have some tendencies where not all of us are going to be able to follow our hunger cues. And the other thing is, like, when she talks about just decide what you want to eat, I can't decide. Like, I don't think she understood like how incapable I am of making decisions, especially at the end of the day. Like, I can't just be like, oh, let me open the fridge and pick something, because nothing sounds good. Like, I have to plan it.
I was thinking that it's a very city-centric view. So I noticed this in a lot of books. They assume that you have access to anything.
Right.
So like, I always pre-decide dinner at the beginning of a 2-week period that we go grocery shopping. And I don't decide what we're going to have every night, but I decide what meals we're going to have. And then all I have is those meals and like some basics like beans and pasta, like I don't
cereal.
have. Right. Like, literally the only food I could just decide to have at the last minute is pizza, or if we want to go drive to the Chinese takeout place. But I can't. So like for lunch, like, and it would take me 20 or 30 minutes, like in the car and to eat whatever I wanted to eat. And so I think that, and that's fine. Like when you live in a city, you just kind of forget that people don't have access to the things you have access to. But like the same thing with vegetables. Like I won't have vegetables unless we decide on the Sunday when we go grocery shopping to buy those vegetables, unless I'm going to drive 15 minutes to the store, spend a half hour there, drive 15 minutes back. So like, I got to pre-decide some things.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like, you can't just open the fridge and like have whatever, because we both cook at home a lot. It's not as much, what do I want right now, as much as I think the way I was looking at it is like where a lot of this freedom comes from is there's no good food or bad food.
Yes.
So there's no worth or deserving around any food. And therefore you're allowed to eat it if you want to, and after you eat it, you don't have to feel bad. And that if you really, like what she's saying is, if you really buy all in on that, you might do things where you binge on foods you haven't let yourself have, but then eventually you get over it.
Yeah.
You like move past it. I am still trying to like reconcile that idea, which I think is true for a lot of people, with what we know about how your brain processes sugar and crack and dopamine. Like, so I think that what she's talking about makes a lot of sense if you're not high on the susceptibility scale that we talked about with the Bright Lining book last week, because I know a lot of people that if like, it doesn't matter how many cookies they have, if they have a cookie every day, like they'll just want to eat 500 forever. Because of, in the same way that like if an alcoholic, you could say to an alcoholic, well, drink all that you want and eventually you'll get tired of drinking. No, like that doesn't happen for an alcoholic. They never wake up and are like, you know what, I've drank enough in my life, I think I'll stop. But a lot of people who don't have alcoholism, that's totally possible. But for an alcoholic, it's not. So I think that that's the other thing about intuitive eating, is you might have some brain chemistry stuff that makes it less possible, in the same way that your son has like it's like a nervous system thing, right?
So yeah, I think what I am taking away from like the intuitive eating chapter and from this book is trying to understand like what messages like have guilt and shame around them, and like what messages am I choosing because they make me feel good. Like, right? Like I feel better if I eat protein for breakfast. Like that's, is that an intuitive eating choice? I don't know. But like, I know that I feel good if I have protein for breakfast. And I know that I feel awful. Like I physically feel awful if I eat too much sugar, or if I eat too late at night. You know, if we bake like cookies or something, and if I eat those like after dinner, like I feel awful and sluggish and I don't sleep well. So there's like intuitive eating choices. Like, yes, I really want a cookie right now, but there's also like the knowledge that if I do that, I'm going to like not feel good, like have stomach upset. So
I think that's what she's calling intuitive eating, is you're making the choice based on how you want to feel. So it's not like you just never think about consequences, right? You don't tell yourself you're a bad person if you want to eat it. And later you're feeling bad just from a sugar high, not from a guilt high or low, right? This is what I wrote down. So like if you're questioning, is something I'm making this choice because kind of the way she puts it is any limitations on what you want to do is like dieting.
Right.
Where there's also the question of like, am I making this choice or setting these rules for myself because otherwise I'll be a bad person? Like I'm not worthy of love if I eat X. So like that's why vegetarianism isn't a diety thing for us, and why avoiding the food that Rowan's allergic to isn't a diety thing for you, because you're not. If you did one time eat it, you wouldn't be a bad person. I don't think people who eat meat are bad people. I think they just don't know. That's my own like superiority complex. But also like, so does what you eat determine your worth? If it's like the pumpkin scone, can you tell I've been thinking about the pumpkin scone? That is about like, do I deserve that? And so that's like diet culture, diet mentality kicking in. Whereas like, I don't want to eat that because it's not going to make me feel good, but I would still be a fine person if I ate it. Yeah. That's a positive, mindset kicking in. And then the other question is like, does your size determine your worth? So if you eat the pumpkin scone and then you look in the mirror later, are you a horrible person because you're the size you are? And then also the other thing is like, because she talks about like, you could still lose weight and be body positive. You could choose to take care of your physical health and be body positive. And I think that a lot of times, and it's definitely happened when I lost weight, which is, we can actually talk about it a little bit, but people think you're a better person if you can lose weight. Like a better human being or more valuable. I don't really know what it is, but it definitely like, it puts a glow of like being better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is like diet culture. So even though you might be doing it for your own physical health, you might be doing it because you realize, hey, I don't have to starve myself anymore. It then comes loaded with all other people's baggage about it. That's the difference in like however you choose to eat. Is it if it's about your worth as a human being, or it's just like a moral choice you're making?
Yeah.
The other thing she doesn't talk about is that sometimes, okay, so this has been true for me, and whenever I've shared this with a girlfriend, like they've said it's resonated. So hopefully for somebody listening, this will resonate. It's hard to say. But like for me, being not socially standard size makes me feel safer, especially when it comes to men and their attention. And even saying that makes me want to like, not like I'm some hottie, but that's the thing is that like, so putting on weight was a way to keep myself safer. I can look specifically at the times where I've gained weight has been times when I wasn't very mentally healthy, stable, right? Like the whole mental health thing was real unstable at the times that I've gained the most amount of weight. And it's been a protection. It's been like a shell. It's been like I can keep people from talking to me. I can keep men from asking for my number or sitting too close to me. I can take up more space in the world, which makes me feel safer. I can basically like avert people's eyes from me because why would they look at me if I have extra weight? So that process isn't body positivity, right? That's like a mental health issue to deal with of like the coping mechanisms. We talked about this in recovery a little bit. The coping mechanisms that you use to keep yourself safe or to tune out. And so that's not necessarily something to celebrate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like another layer of the body acceptance is to, obviously, I'm worthy and deserving of love at every size. And yet it doesn't mean that I don't need to look at specifically, why do I do this? And if it's to keep myself safe, how can I feel safe no matter the size? Mm-hmm. In the same way, you can be healthy at every size. Could I feel safe at every size? So I hope that makes sense and helps somebody.
Yeah. No, I've definitely heard that story from a lot of people I've talked to, and it's certainly true for me. I know that I had like a bad relationship experience in like junior year of high school, and I definitely think that putting on weight, while it did make me feel bad that I wasn't getting like attention from boys, it was also like in a way of keeping me safe to not repeat that bad relationship experience. Like I can definitely see that, and I've heard that story from a lot of people, like that we wear our weight definitely as a way of staying invisible, and of protecting ourselves.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who have, this is so much in the news now with the Kavanaugh hearings, a lot of women who have suffered sexual assault, it's a way of making sure that people don't find you like attractive, therefore to assault you. Mm-hmm. And it's like that, the fact that we live in a world where that's what you feel like you have to do. And I think, mostly it's subconscious. It's not like I ever thought about it. It actually took a lot of therapy to realize like, oh, that's what's happening here. And then to love and accept myself anyhow, right? To decide that I'm worthy of taking care of myself no matter the reasons. Because that's the thing is that I think on the flip side, there's this cultural narrative like, oh, if she's protecting herself by gaining weight, that she should work on losing weight. Like, no, you should work on feeling safe in your body first and then whatever.
Yeah.
And part of feeling safe is taking care of yourself and deciding that you're worthy and deserving of love. You don't have to do anything to earn it.
Yeah. It's definitely, there's like a lot to unpack in this book. I definitely recommend people read it. Like I thought it was really, the parts I've read, I've enjoyed.
Yeah. And if you are totally new, so I think we'd both recommend this book to somebody who's totally new to the idea of body positivity and body acceptance. Or if all you've done like me is see people's posts on Instagram, that's just like a tiny snippet. This book lays it out, like where it's coming from. We talked a lot about diet culture here when we were talking, kind of what body acceptance is, the ways she gives you like some steps to take to move away from the diet culture and towards the body acceptance for yourself.
Yeah. And it's definitely like a good book to read kind of in conjunction with Dietland, which we talked about, I don't know, maybe 12 or so episodes ago.
Yeah, totally. If Dietland made no sense to you, I feel like read this book and then go read Dietland, because she actually talks about like the like land of diets, right? Like diet land, the diet culture that we live in. And she talks about the history of weight loss products and culture, and like that book really like kind of talks about that in the background as well.
One thing I love is she talks about how like cellulite wasn't even like a term that people used until there was a product to fix the cellulite. Like people are basically inventing problems about our bodies so that they can then sell us a fix for it. But first, they have to make us feel like that thing is terrible so that we all then rush out to buy the fix.
Right. I think the same thing is true of stretch marks. Yeah. Like stretch marks haven't always been they're just a thing your body does. I mean, it's like having lungs or something. Like it's like a natural occurrence, especially after childbirth or pregnancy.
Like that's what I always try and remind myself when you have things like stretch marks, or you have things like cellulite or bushy eyebrows or like facial hair. I saw a great post about facial hair the other day that all women have like a fine layer. You were supposed to have it, but like all of those messages that we are told that any part of your body you feel like is ugly is because someone has decided that you have a fix for it, but first they have to make you believe that thing is ugly.
Yes, I know. It's so troubling. So if you want to learn all about that, read this book. Our covers look slightly different. Do you have your cover? This is my American cover. That's Jolie's.
I will say that this isn't just for women. Tara and I are obviously talking about it from the female perspective, but men have these same messages given to them about what their bodies should look like, especially that they should be tall and broad-shouldered and muscly. And if you are not, like, I think we're more accepting of a society of like the dad bod with like a beer belly or whatever than we are of a woman who has a mom bod. Like that's not even a term. Yeah, I think if you have men in your life, like if you could convince them to read it, it would be interesting for them to read as well.
And there is a story in here so she has several essays written by other people, and she has a story of a transgender man who wrote an essay, and then also a Black man wrote an essay about his body, in society is not even like, and the worth issues and the value issues around that. So she does have some male perspectives in here that are interesting.
All right. So that's it for this week. Bye, guys.
Bye.